It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is stars from the Hearing Aid sessions way back there in 1985. And a guy who knows a little bit about that, just a little bit, would be the one and only legendary photographer, Mark, the Weissguy Weiss. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing good.
Well, it's good to have you on the show. I've been a big fan of yours for a lot of years. I'm sure that anyone who is a fan of hard rock, heavy metal of the 80s has a little bit of piece of you in their house or in their car or somewhere in their life, and that's a pretty awesome thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I love hearing the stories that, and then they send pictures, fans send pictures of their walls with my pictures on it, posters, centerfolds, and it's a kick, it's and all these years later, actually reconnecting with some of these fans too, that after they see their pictures in the book. I actually got a call from one of the girls that was in the Judas Priest photo. She DM'd me and sent me a picture of her holding the same sign that she held in the photo that I shot in 1982.
Nice, very nice. Well, you know what? Hard rock and heavy metal fans are unlike any other fans in the world, as I'm sure you're well aware. And they hold on to that kind of stuff. It is near and dear to their heart. It's part of their soul. It's part of their everyday life. And you are a big part of that for a lot of people who own some of the very classic albums or own some of the magazines or anything to do with rock and roll memorabilia, especially through the 80s. You're a big part of that.
Hey, I collect my own stuff too. I have the magazines. I have a lot of the props that I did that I have from my shoots. The photos that I save, everything's in boxes. And now, like with the book, it kind of gave me a chance to find these things and kind of relive some of these moments.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, being such a fan, when I heard about the book coming out, I was a first day buyer. I have it right here.
Oh, nice. Cool.
And I got it last Thursday, as a matter of fact. It came out on Tuesday. I had it by Thursday via Amazon.
Nice.
And as soon as I knew this thing was coming out, I thought to myself, I got to own this for the Classic Metal Show studio. And not only that, but just for my own edification because of, I lived in that era. I lived in that decade. I was in L.A. most of the 80s, from 85 to 91. So, to relive that for me was a big deal. And to flip through this absolutely beautiful picture book, it just brought back a lot of memories. And it's just like, man, that is a time in man's history that will never repeat itself.
There'll never be a decade like it. I mean, it was just like those people that are still loving the same music. Like when I go to a concert, it's almost like, fast forward 30, 40 years, and it's like the same people in the audience, plus their kids. And it was just one big party, and it was a happy time. Everyone was like happy, and they loved the music, and they loved the experience, buying the T-shirts, going on the party train, going into New York City, or catching a ride in your friend's van and smoking pot and drinking beers and whatever. It's just like that decade. Really, nothing's gonna ever top that decade. Really.
No, never. That was definitely a moment in time that was very special. I'm glad that I lived during this era and to actually be in LA at that time and be a part of it. And I started this show, this Classic Metal Show, back in 1996 when that style of music and that era was no longer popular because I wanted it to live on. And here I am 25 years later, still hosting this show live every Saturday. And having someone like yourself be a part of the show now and be part of the CMS history is a huge deal for me. And I'm not saying that just because I have you here on the show, but because it really is.
Well, thanks. It's an honor. I mean, I love talking to people. Like, I've never really done interviews before this. I mean, here and there, but I finally have something to say. I put everything in my book, and I just I love reaching out and sharing what I accomplished for those 10 years.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about this book, this absolutely beautiful coffee table book here. This is The Decade That Rocked. It absolutely did. It's full of Mark's photographs in here, a lot of terrific pictures in here. But not only is there photos in here, but there's a lot of backstory about a lot of these photos. So let's talk a little bit about that, Mark. I mean, obviously you're a photographer. You go way back to the very early years in your youth in the 70s, and obviously got your claim to fame getting to be a magazine photographer. At what point did you decide, you know what, it's time to release a book, get these photos out here, and maybe even tell a little backstory about it? When did you start planning to do a book like this?
Well, I signed my contract with the Inside Editions, my publisher, and 7 years ago in September.
Wow.
And I know. And the first 2 years, we were going to have it like a hairband book, and I just didn't want, I wanted it to be simple, easy, fun. And then after we were like, a year into it, I'm thinking like, do I really want this to be my first book? I kind of took the easy way out, but then I kind of like said, you know what, let me focus. I want something that's gonna like, have my legacy and have my, my experiences all in one spot. And I want it to be a narrative about what I went through in the 80s and how I became a photographer and with all my experiences. So I switched it to The Decade That Rocked, and I wanted it to be about photo shoots that were kind of important to me during that era, and that were not just a photo of a band against a wall, but so most of the photos in there have stories to it. It's very narrative. A lot of the bands were interviewed, artists were interviewed to talk about, reflect, and it's just kind of like a timeline of the 80s. It's almost like a history book. It's kind of like, me as a photographer weaves through the evolution of imagery of the bands of that decade.
Absolutely. Well, obviously there's a lot of backstory here. Now, did you write most of this yourself, or did you have any help with authoring this, photographer book? Because I myself, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, I'm no writer, and I've been asked to write here and there. And for me, it's a struggle. And if you're not a writer, it can be a arduous task to put pen to paper, as it were. Was that easy for you, or did you get some help, or how did that work for you?
Well, at first it was going to be more of with interviews with my subjects. I didn't think I had much to say, so I'm like, Daniel Siwick did the interviews, and I wanted the rock stars to tell the story. And then I decided I wanted it to be narrative. And then we have these great interviews from Daniel. We took those interviews and took quotes out of it, which kind of laces throughout the book. And then we had, then I started writing on my own. And I never wrote before, but I just poured my thoughts down on words. And it was just so overwhelming. I had to just like do a little bit at a time. And every time I did a section, I would pass it off to Richard Beanstalk, who kind of untangled my words. So I would like send him something on a certain photograph, and he'd send it back to me like pretty quick, like within an hour or two. And I look at it, the Word doc, and I said, well, what did you do? You didn't do anything. It looks the same. And then I looked the red line, and like, I see all these, grammatical mistakes, and
sure.
and like, it made me sound like how I wanted to sound, so it was a very, I wouldn't even say it was tedious. It was enjoyable, actually, putting out my words and having it come back and then sending it to the editor. Then they edit it down. So it's a whole process. But, we worked diligently on it for the last, 3 years with Richard.
Right. Well, obviously, this book contains hundreds and hundreds of photos. And, how did you go through the task of actually picking and choosing which photos go in this book? Because, I mean, I looked through this book. I just got it, as I said, just a few days ago, so I haven't had a chance to digest it properly. But holy cow, how did you go through all of your photo gallery from, years and years ago and go, yeah, that one belongs in the book, or not that one so much? How did you do that?
It was really, really difficult, let me tell you. I mean, that's why I didn't want to do the book. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do this, And then over the decades, I would have, I would get, for some of the magazines that still did some kind of a revisit from the early days, retro on bands, and the bands would have remasters, or they want some merch, retro merch. So I'd have like kind of a good catalog already archived in my, in my office in the hard drives, and I would use that kind of as the beginning part, and then I broke it down into years because I wanted it to be very like, it's the only way I could possibly have done it is just do it. Look at 1 year at a time. So I started with 1980. I did the early years first. That was kind of the easiest because it was just a little trinkling of what I did. And there's only a handful of photos in that. But then when 1980 hit, I kind of like looked at just my photos of 1980. And then I, try to think of stories and seeing what I might have left out. And it kind of just happened that way. Every chapter kind of, I went from 1980 to 1981. And then after I had it to 1990, I had so many photographs. I'm like, all right, now what? And then we started designing. We went through a couple designers. The first thing, it didn't work. The first one, and we got someone else. And it was just like back and forth. And we ended up designing a book of 600 pages. And the book was only supposed to be 278 pages. So they gave me an extra 120 because of the content. They, the publishing company felt strongly about the content and wanted it, to give me the pages. And they even gave me 3 gatefolds on top of that. So, they gave me some extra love on that, and it just kind of worked through it. And then the stories, and then it really was about the stories. And then the stories kind of took over what the photos were going to be. It wasn't just going to be photos of a band on the road, only if it meant something. Like the Motley Crue story was when Nicky wanted me to draw blood, and he started biting me and all that. So that made the book. Stories like that. The album covers always have a story. With Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry, where the photo shoot almost broke up the band. With Poison, when I got held up at gunpoint with the film, and so the stories that kind of really meant something, and instead of just this is Bon Jovi on the road, or this is this one on the road, that will be another book actually. I have another book that I'm thinking about where I'll just call it Black and White, the Decade That Rocked BW, and have all the nitty gritty black and white road photos. So this one's just very specific on shoots that kind of got me to the next level or opened up a door, or some that are just my favorite photos.
Absolutely. Well, did you, while looking through your archives and looking at photos, did you ever get to this moment of when did I take that? Where was that from? Did you have any of those moments where you thought, I don't recall ever taking that picture. Was that one of mine?
Well, probably all of them. I felt that way. If you read page 26, you'll know why. I laugh about it, but it was serious. When I was 13, I had a motorcycle, a little mini bike, Suzuki, right. And I had a head-on collision with my friend, and I was unconscious, and I kind of, went in the hospital, and when I woke up, I didn't remember who I was, and my memory, in the years to come, I mean, obviously I woke up, I knew who I was eventually in the next few days, but my memory was never the same, and I really don't remember a lot of the stuff. So the pictures, I know they're mine because I've seen them so many times, and obviously I know, when I talk about the stories more than once, it kind of goes in my brain that way. But a lot of the shoots I don't remember, and I leave it to a story to know that it happened the way it did, because I've told people and they tell me what happened. So I kind of I took a little bit of the interviews of the rock stars and the little what I remember, and my assistants, and the photographs really tell the story. So it kind of it's not a vivid memory, but the more I look at the book and the more I read it, which I will be doing it a lot because I want to, I do feel gypped out of a lot of my memories. A lot of times I see the bands on the road and they say, remember this and remember that. And they're all laughing and smiling. I'm like a kid, like just listening to the story for the first time. And the story is about me.
Right.
And it's like, it's kind of fun. And it worked for me. It became who I was, and I was accepting it, and so that's why it's especially meaning to me to have this book.
Absolutely. So a week from now, if somebody says, "Hey, I saw you on the Classic Metal Show," you go, "Where did you see me? I don't remember doing that."
Well, if you have a distinctful look, so that's and I'll remember that skeleton over there hanging up, and the more, like, if I watch this every day for the next week, then maybe in 2 weeks I'll
sure.
I'll remember. But I always like to, like, next time I see you, like if M3 or whatever, wherever I see you next, like just out of nowhere, just talk to me and don't be surprised if I really don't remember. And like, a lot of people take it like, I'm too busy or I'm stuck up or whatever. And it's like, no, I want to remember when we hung out and partied and did stuff, and I'm not up on any kind of platform where anyone's better than the other one. And that's why I don't remember you. It's just like, it's just the way brains work. Some people are doctors and neurosurgeons and some people are, it's all about, what you do with what you got.
Right. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you something, Mark. Obviously you had an interest in photography very early on in your life. And, at what point did you and I'm going to use a, cliche term here. At what point did you decide or have this interest in becoming a shutterbug, where you found photography interesting enough to where you go, what, I'm going to go to concerts. I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to, do this because it's a passion of mine. At what point did you think that photography was a good thing for you?
Well, I didn't have a choice, because I didn't do good in school because of the memory. I couldn't remember like things. So I didn't do well. I mean, I got by. I didn't like it. I never really liked reading because I couldn't remember what ever read a page. I couldn't remember what was the first paragraph. So I was just a visual person, and I liked music. I liked, Zeppelin and Aerosmith at the time, and, Ted Nugent and, bands like that. And I just would listen to my brother. My brother was in a band when I was 13, and I was around him a lot, and it was like a cover band. And I was just introduced to that whole world. And then when I got into high school, it seemed like you're either like a jock and hung out with the football guys, or you would hang out with the burnouts on the hill, and smoke pot or whatever and hang out. And I was kind of like, I was in the middle. I was friends with everybody, but I knew I wasn't going to be a scholar, and I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor or anything. So I really didn't know what I was going to be, and I was always nervous about what I was going to be. I was like, what am I going to do? I want to have fun. I don't want a day job. I want something, I didn't know. And then once I kind of latched onto this a bit and had a little bit of success by making a little bit of money, I still didn't think I was going to make a living out of it, but I was just going full force. My parents wanted me to go to college, so I went to college for a semester, dropped out after one semester, and ended up going on the road with the band that I met at the college doing lights. And then I didn't even tell them until 6 months later, I started having a little more success, and I got into some magazines and making a little bit of money with when I got into circus. And then I started, realizing that this could be a career path. And I just put all my focus on it. I was just 100% like, there's no other choice. What else am I going to do? There was no, I didn't know how hard it was. And for me, it wasn't hard. It was just very natural. I just got along with people. I met people. They liked me. I liked them. I liked hanging out. I didn't even care if I made any money. It's like I'm hanging out with bands, hanging out with girls and, partying and doing all the things rock stars do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like all gypsies.
Right. So what makes a good photographer? I mean, in today's day and age with everything digital, obviously you grew up in a golden age where, there was still physical media out there, obviously magazines and album covers, and then obviously it moved into CD covers and things like that. Physical media played a huge part in the lives of yourself as well as mine. I'm sure you could see behind me, I've got a big physical library behind me. And that was huge for people who collected albums and, wanted to see the cover photos and read the liner notes and all that other stuff. You were right in the thick of doing that. So what makes a good photographer, especially, what made you so successful as a photographer?
Well, you got to be yourself. And if it's you that they like being around you. I feel like in any business, if they want people that they like around you. You have to be good at what you do, but you have to have the personality that they click with. Like even guys in a band, there could be a better guitar player, but this guitar player makes you more creative, or it just enhances the whole project. With photography, it's important that you get along. You have, with me, I'm pretty low key. I was just honored to be in, once I started working with the bigger bands, that just to be in the same room, I was honored and a privilege, and I just was kind of keeping quiet. And when I could throw a little bit of 2 cents of my personality and kid around a little bit, I would. And sometimes I get a reaction, and I know, I kind of know when and when not to take the picture, and it's just a trust thing too. And then, of course, the proof is in the pudding. So you have to come up with the goods. And I just, I kind of have a thing for making people look as good as they can possibly look. I can see their angles, and I would guide them when we do photo shoots. I'm not a very technical guy, but I know if you put a light in front of someone and you move it to the left, it will give a shadow, and they'll look better with the angle down. So just like really trial and error. That's how I learned. And I guess I never had like a ton of assistants with me. It was just kind of like, one man show with one person helping when it's a bigger shoot, or 2 people. Sure. But I think everyone just we just all got along. We like the same music, from the 70s, and, come from the same cloth.
Right. So a lot of it has to do with personality and your ability to get along as opposed to your talent.
It's all has a I'd say 50-50 on that. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Now, what's your thoughts on your contemporary like a Neil Zilzauer? I mean, obviously he had a big career, a lot in the 80s too, and he had as big a career as you did, and probably the top 2 in the top tier is Mark Weiss and Neil Zilzauer. Those are the 2 top names of that era. So what's your thoughts, and are you friends with him?
Oh yeah. Well, back then it was he had a few years on me. His claim to fame was from Van Halen. I mean, he was shooting even before Van Halen in the mid 70s, getting into concerts and being successful with it. But when Van Halen hit, he took on to him, and he kind of grew with Van Halen. And then he started working with the rock magazines and other bands, just like I did. When I came on the scene, I was the kid, and I used to go. I'm on the East Coast. He's on the West Coast, and I used to go to the West Coast because, as you know, there was a lot of stuff going on at that point, and I wanted to take advantage of any opportunity I could get. A lot of video shoots were there. And we both wanted the same shoots, and we both got the same, we both shot with the same bands. It's like the band's having 2 girlfriends, one's on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast.
Right.
And we're 2 different people. Like he's a real, very loud and party guy, and, has his way of saying things. He's, he's not shy, and I am shy, and I'm low key. I'm East Coast. And, it's like the bands have the best of both worlds. They get their, their party, very in your face. And then you got me, low key. So, whenever I would go on the road, or whenever Neil would go on the road, it was like having, two different flavors.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
They always kept us separate. You know what I mean? It's like you don't want the two girlfriends to be in the same room. And but so funny enough, I mean, you know, so there was that creative,
Rivalry.
you know, what am I trying to say?
Creative rivalry.
Yeah, creative rivalry. Yeah, but you know, after the decade was over and we were all like trying to like figure out what we're gonna do with ourselves, you know, years later, decades later, me and Neil, we hung out, of course, and just in February, we're on the Monster Rock cruise where, you know, we hung out together, our girlfriends hung out, and you know, swapped stories, and you know, just kind of, you know, talk about, you know, the old days and where we're at today, you know. So
absolutely. Well, most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, a new book was released about the band Dokken, and the author, James Curl, thought so much of your photography that he actually purchased this photo from you because he wanted his book to have legitimacy.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about that photo? Anything about it? Any story at all?
I think that was from when they did the one with Freddy Krueger in it, Dream Warrior, from the video, and I might have set up a background at the video shoot, I believe. That was probably '88 or so, and probably one of my last photo shoots with the band.
Absolutely. Well, you obviously did Erase the Slate.
Oh, and you know who that is in Erase the Slate? That's my son.
So you did work with them after '88.
Oh yeah. Well, when Reb joined the band,
Right.
I met with the classic lineup.
Oh, I gotcha.
Me and Don were friends from the early days, and he used to give me keys to his house when he was on tour, and when he was home, I'd sleep on the couch. I mean, we were very, very close, and we still are.
Yep.
But that's my son Guy. He's now 27 with his own son, who's 4 years old.
Nice.
Look
at that.
Project,
well,
yeah.
You know, I was saying at the very beginning of the interview here that everybody carries a piece of Mark Weiss with them if you're a fan of 80s rock. And I don't know if you could see this, Mark.
It looks like a cross. I don't see what does it say on it?
It's the cross from the Dokken cover.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Because I art direct. Oh, wow. Yeah. Where'd you get? I got to get one of those because I designed that cover as well. I was the art director.
I know. That's why I brought this up.
Oh, wow.
I had a silversmith friend of mine make that cross for Don's 48th birthday.
Get out. Oh, my God. That's great.
It's a silver cross. I've been wearing this since 1999.
That's awesome. Wow. That's real
I
cool.
haven't taken it off. I had 10 of them made. I have one, and I gave Don the other 9, and he gave them to his kids and himself. And Jeff Pilson has one. Mick Brown has one.
Oh,
Rhett has one. So these are kind of like one of a kind. But as I was saying at the beginning of the interview, everybody carries a little Mark Weiss with them, and I've been wearing this for, almost 30 years.
Oh my God, that's an honor. See, I love that story. That's great.
So there you go. So I was so impressed with this Erase the Slate cover and that cross on the front, and knowing that was your son on there. See how cool that is? It's a small world.
Yeah, here's him about that time, a couple years later, as Gene Simmons.
Out of focus there, Mark.
I don't know. Am I in focus?
Oh, yeah. No, now you are. I see it now. Oh, yeah. I see he's dressed as Kiss.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorites. And yeah, now I have a grandson named Jackson. He's 4.
Look at that.
So maybe the next Dokken album cover, I can put him on it.
Very cool. Well, Mark, I could sit here and talk to you all evening, and I don't want to dominate your whole time, but it was important for me to get you to come on the show and talk about your new book, The Decade That Rocked. This thing is a beast. It weighs about 20 pounds, and it's got hundreds of Mark Weiss photos in here, along with stories and pullouts and just, things that you would never see anywhere else. And you can pick it up. It's available now. And I really recommend you go get this thing if you're a fan of hard rock, heavy metal, 80s metal, whatever you want to call it, because there's a lot of stories in here, a lot of great photos. And I like the fact that, you put Guns N' Roses on the cover here with Nikki Sixx. And it's just good stuff.
Yeah, it actually, I just got an email from my publicist, and he sent me it made the top 10, or not the top 10, the top 3 presents for Father's Day on the CNN list. Believe it.
I believe it. I believe it.
It just came up. I'm like, oh my God, my kids were impressed. They go, oh my God, you're cool. And my daughter works with CNN, so it's kind of cool too.
Well, that is badass. Now, real quick before I let you go there, Mark, but obviously Guns N' Roses has a reputation of not being the most, what do you want to call, easiest band to talk to or get to know or hang out with. Obviously Axl has a little bit of a temper, and he's not the most easy guy to get along with. How did you get along with Guns N' Roses yourself?
Well, the first time I shot them, they didn't want to shoot with me because they had their own photographer that they kind of like grew with. And, I understand loyalty and whatnot, but the publicist, Bryn Bridenthal, said, you really should shoot with some rock photographers to get you, they can help you get into some magazines. And, they were so confident, they didn't really care. And they kept saying no, but Bryn's, Bryn kept, saying, he's going to be in LA, why don't we do a shoot? So they broke down and gave me like a 30-minute shoot. In between, before the record was even released, and it was the first time we met. And Axl didn't really like look at me, and he was giving me the finger, like on his, not up in my face, but like on his pants. He was like, holding his finger down.
Right.
And I saw it, and I just didn't say anything. He wouldn't look at me, and I got him to look at me for a few shots. And then, ironically enough, the last shoot I did with the lineup, which is on the cover that we shot, and he has the finger. So it's kind of like, it kind of meant something. And it ends up, that means he likes you.
Very cool.
But Axl, everyone has their personalities, everyone has different balances in their brain, some affect you a certain way during certain things. So with people like that, you just have to give them a little extra care and give them a little extra space and just be there. And usually those, like Axl's very unique, and he's one that kind of lasted all these decades and had a vision, and he kept to it. And I'm honored again that I'm still in their lives. Even the last tour, I went out and said hi and shot a few shows and welcomed me to shoot the whole show. And it's just great having these relationships, 30, 40 years later.
Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, Mark, why don't you share one very cool story with the Classic Metal Show fans that maybe isn't one of your well-known stories, like introducing Sebastian Bach to Skid Row or something. One thing that sticks out in your mind that you could share that, maybe somebody might appreciate.
Well, I refer to the biting story when I got initiated on the Motley Crue tour bus in 1984 when they opened up for Ozzy. I was on tour with Ozzy. I knew Motley. We've done several shoots since '82, and good to see him. And they said, "Hey, you want to take a break from Ozzy and come on the bus with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I go on the bus. Nikki brings me to the bus. Tommy's at the driver's side, and he puts his leg out, so I couldn't go any further. And he stopped me, and I'm like, okay, and then Nikki just starts biting my leg, my thigh, and he's like, and he looks at me like deranged. He's like, draw blood. I'm like, what do you mean draw blood? He's like, and he just kept biting my thigh, and until I bled a little bit, and there was a bottle of Jack Daniels next to me. I started drinking it because I was starting to feel the pain a little bit. That was when I first started my Jack Daniels habit, and then I eventually bit him back, and they let me on, and Vince is in the back shaking his head, and Mick's going, and that was it. and so supposedly I thought I was the only one they did this to, but I hear through through stories that they've done it to quite a few of people, and usually ones that they like. So I'll take that as a good thing.
All right. So either you get the finger or you get bitten. That just goes to show people like you.
That's rock and roll.
All right. Well, Mark, next time I see you, I'm going to punch you square in the face just to show you that I like you.
That'd be awesome. That's great.
All right. Well, Mark, I appreciate you taking the time. Seriously, I'm a huge fan. I was really thrilled to get this book, and I was even more thrilled to have you here on the show. So go pick this book up. It's called The Decade That Rocked. It's a big coffee table book. It's got hundreds of pictures in it. Good stories. Mark, a fantastic guy, obviously, and he was willing to come on and talk to a scrub like me. So what can I tell you about that?
Well, thanks for having me, and I just want to end this by just letting you guys know that this new thing that I'm doing, it's a little episodic adventure TV show called the Weissguy, and we just put the first episode up. It's only like 12 minutes, and it's basically these two guys that never grew up in the 80s, and they stalk me, and they sneak in the shows, and they sneak backstage and to my kid's graduation party and all sorts of things. And Brian from Tesla's in it. He does a little cameo. He sneaks on the Tesla bus, and then we have Chips Enough from Enough's Enough singing his Fly High Michelle in a fantasy scene. So it's kind of a funny little thing. So it's on my YouTube channel where a lot of my interviews, and where this will actually end up as well. It's my home base for that, as well as the Decade That Rock site. So yeah, check it out. It's fun.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a couple of links there. So where is the main place people can find out about Mark?
I'd say that it's thedecadethatrock.com.
All right.
That's your main thing, because my YouTube channel's on there, my social media, and then all my social media. I'm just I have Mark Weiss Photography, but I'm really pushing the Decade That Rocked as a brand. I feel that the younger kids identify better to a name and a brand than a 60-year-old photographer just telling some stories. So it's all there, but I want a brand. I don't want to be faceless, but it's my photography, it's my stories, but it's the Decade That Rocked, and that's what it should be about, not Mark Weiss.
Absolutely. All right. The name of the book is called The Decade That Rocked, over thedecadethatrock.com. Go check that out and go pick this book up, because you will not regret it. Love it. All right, Mark, appreciate you taking the time, and we always end the interview with take us out with a tune. So do you have a song in mind that we should play that is representative of you, or something that you enjoy the most?
Oh boy. Oh God. It's a good question. It's a good question. I wish I was able to think about it.
Well, you're friends with Skid Row, you're friends with Bon Jovi, you're friends with Dokken, you're friends with Guns N' Roses, you're friends with Motley. Any one of those bands would work.
Welcome to the Jungle. I mean, that's a no-brainer, really, if you think about it. Like, that kind of says it all. It's the angst of young rock and rollers, and still to this day, you crank it up and you just want to start working out or running faster, or screwing faster, whatever you want to do. It's rock and roll. I mean, that's the song.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here with some GNR with Welcome to the Jungle, exclusively here on the Classic Metal Show.